Hey, how you doing? Nick James here. What a phenomenal time to be alive. Welcome to episode number 6 of Open and Real Q&A. Jav is always here with me with the questions. Let's get straight into it. What you got?
So the first one is from Paul Glover. And he wants to know, are there any scenarios where you felt it appropriate to not stick to the value we do what we say we'll do?
Okay, Paul, so great question. For context, those that might not be familiar with our company values, we've got 7. I'm not going to list them all. One of them is we do what we say we'll do. And I guess the question is, are there any circumstances or have there been any circumstances where I felt it was appropriate to go against that value? Yes, definitely. And I think, Paul, the key is that I would only do that if I felt that would align with all the other values. Let me give you an example. Let's say we set ourselves a number of targets over the course of a quarter, which we generally do in our business. And let's say one of the ways we were going to hit one of those targets, we do some testing with, and then it doesn't work the way we thought it would. Now, you could argue that what we said we were going to do was utilize this strategy throughout the quarter, every single week. Well, if you get 4, 5, 6 weeks into the quarter and it ain't working, it would be foolish to stubbornly say we're going to keep doing it just because we said we would. It'd be smarter to go, look, we said we were going to hit the target, and I'm less interested in how we hit the target and more interested in the fact that we actually do. So I wouldn't, that's probably the exception though, Paul. Like I wouldn't, or I certainly don't encourage our team, and I certainly don't, say we're going to do something and then not do it. Very often, if we ever do, it's more a change of tact or change of strategy rather than, we said we were going to do this and we haven't, and that's okay. Again, I guess as long as the intention is always good, Paul, then I think you're in good shape. So have we ever set a target and not hit it? Well, yeah, we have plenty of times. The intention has always been to hit the target. The intention has always been there. Sometimes we haven't. You could argue, well, Nick, if you set a target and you didn't hit it, then you didn't do what you said you would do. I guess the point is we would always intend to do what we said we would do, and then only deliberately change that for the right reasons or with the best intention. Hopefully that answers your question, Paul. I mean, what I will say is having your company values clearly established, documented, communicated, discussed regularly as a team, for me, that makes a huge difference in terms of the environment that you get to build and that you get to work in. And so, having, in our case, those 7 values established and having them as a regular topic of discussion means that it's not that common, not that often where we find or see any one of our team or the team as a whole massively out of kilter with those values. Good question, like it. Jav, what you got? What's the number 2?
Number 2 is from Daniel Wilding.
Yeah.
And he wants to know, what funding opportunities would you advise are helpful for my startup social enterprise?
Okay, Daniel. So funding for a startup social enterprise. Now, I'm lacking a bit of information because I don't know exactly what the social enterprise is about. But that said, the good news is there are lots of potential funding sources available to all businesses, whether they're a not-for-profit or a social enterprise or indeed a profit-based business. So I think the first thing before we start to look at where you might get the funding is actually to set up get all the information ready that a funder would likely want or need. So, work out what are the financial projections for this social enterprise. Like, how are you going to attract income? What are the more likely for a social enterprise? What are the key cost bases or cost centers that are going to be important over the first 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 24 months? Get clear on all of that so you actually know how much funding you need, because it's hard to go for funding unless you know how much. And secondly, then what you're going to do with that, because someone who's funding you will want to know. And then look, there's loads of potential places you could get funding. You can go high street bank, you can go, I guess, more alternative funding. You could go private investors, but all of those different types of people are going to want to see the financial projections for that business. They're going to want to see essentially what the main cost bases, cost centers are, how much money is going to be needed, when it's going to be needed, and what it's going to be needed for. Get all that information first, and then who you go to seek funding is almost secondary. It's certainly less important than how much you need, what you need it for, and what the future of your social enterprise likely looks like. I think that's important first and foremost.
Nice. Okay, the third question is from Richard COWELL.
Yeah.
And it's, what has been your best and worst ever investment? That's time and money.
Okay, Richard. So what has been my best investment, time, money? What's been my worst investment, time, money? There could be a load of different answers here. So I think, you know, what's interesting is I've made some relatively small investments that have been very, very good investments. And I've made some large investments that have also been very good investments. So it's hard to say. Certainly, you know, if you looked at purely from a financial return point of view, like multiples return on investment, some of the smaller ones are probably better. But I think, and I've probably given this answer before when I've been asked, probably the best financial investment I made was the investment I made in having Gary Vaynerchuk headline our first Expert Empires event in 2017, because it was at the time the biggest financial investment I've made in my business. So that's the first reason. It was a big deal for me. And secondly, the direct financial return within 6 months was pretty good. Like, you know, we've more than, I think we've more than doubled our money on that event within 6 months. And of course, it was the start point. It was the catalyst for then everything else that followed. So yeah, I'd have to say that would be probably one of the best financial investments I made in the business. Best investment I've made in terms of time in the business would have to be the many days, weeks, months I've spent over many, many years traveling all over the world, being in the right environment as a kid, attending Tony Robbins seminars, workshops, conferences all over the world. Then, you know, in my kind of mid to late 20s, going over to the States a lot to study with amazing, you know, experts like Dan Kennedy and Frank Kern and Jeff Walker and people like that. You know, those investments of time, there was some financial investment as well, of course, but those investments of time were incredibly valuable because of the people that I met and that I connected with. And, you know, some of those people I'm still connected with now, and those friendships and business partnerships have brought tremendous value. Worst investments, probably be more difficult for me to answer this. You know what, like, I don't think there's not any major financial disasters in terms of investments that I've made where I've lost loads. There's been some less beneficial investments. So, like, I'm not going to name names, but some of the speakers that I've paid, you know, 6-figure fees to, the return we got on those 6-figure fees were not as good as some of the others. But actually, the worst one, we had an event that it just about broke even overall. So it was actually a loss on the front end. And when you factored everything else in, it kind of just broke even. It was marginally in profit. So when you think about the amount of time and energy and money that went into the event, to then only just about break even, the opportunity cost was huge. And so it was probably a loser, if you like. But then, funnily enough, like I know for a fact there's one person that attended that event that went on to spend 6 figures with us. So I go, and that was in the years that followed. So it's very difficult for me to say financially what's been the worst investment. I'd say I've just had some investments that have been less beneficial. By the way, I've had a couple of small investments that I've made in other businesses, other companies that, you know, I've had a punt, you know, not hundreds of thousands of pounds, but, you know, thousands, sometimes tens of thousands, but relatively small in the huge scheme of things that have like completely flopped and gone nowhere. But I think I knew that was a possibility when I went into them. So they were speculative punts at best. I can think of a couple off the top of my head where, you know, I just pumped a few grand into something that I went, let's see what happens. It might fly, it might die. And you know what? I'm kind of okay either way. The potential upside was huge. The potential downside was lose it all. And so I went into it with my eyes open. In terms of the worst investment of my time, that's a really difficult one to answer. I mean, look, I have attended conferences, workshops, events. I cited those as some of the best investments I've made of my time, and there's certainly been the odd one where I go, was that really worth it? But my attitude, I suppose, is that even if I go to America for, you know, a 3-day event, and by the time I've flown there and flown back, it's 5 days. If I only get one thing from that event, and I implement and apply that one thing and it makes a difference in my business, then that 3, 4, 5 days away was worth it. So I probably don't ever see anything that I do as a bad investment of time, because as long as there's one thing, like I guess you could say my standards are probably quite low in that respect. Like whenever I invest time in anything, like my coach just recommended an audio book that he's like, you have to read this or listen to this book. So I've just purchased it today. So I've got the audio book, and my expectations are relatively high because it comes well recommended, but I'm also going into it going, I'm probably going to invest, and I don't actually know how long the audio book is, but let's say it's 4 or 5 hours listening to it. But I go, if I get one thing out of this book that I implement and makes a difference in my business, then that 4 or 5 hours was worth it. Now I might spend, out of those, let's say 5 hours, 4 hours and 55 minutes might be a complete waste. There might be nothing of any use in there. I don't think that will be the case, but there could be. But I could get one nugget in 5 minutes that changes everything. So I suppose I rarely see anything as a bad investment of time, because my attitude is always, I only need one thing to be useful or beneficial from it. What I will say is there have certainly been certain places where I've invested my time over the years that have been more valuable and more beneficial based upon the return that activity generated, either financially or mentally, emotionally, spiritually. There's of course other ways you can invest time, not just to gain financially, but for your own happiness, well-being, peace of mind.
Love it. Just out of interest, what was the book?
Oh, the book, and it's that recent that I've just got to pull the message up. It's called Trust and Inspire: How Truly Great Leaders Unleash Greatness in Others, and it is by Stephen M.R. Covey.
Nice.
There you go.
Love that.
So I will be getting on that imminently. It'll be on my journey to and from the gym, journey to and from the office, probably for the next week, depending on how long it is. I actually don't know. Let's have a look. 11 hours and 51 minutes. How much time does, Jeff, how much time do you think I've got? In fairness though, that's like, all right, so let's call it 12 hours. I'm probably an hour a day in the car to and from the gym, to and from the office. So it'll be less than 2 weeks. And to be fair, I do trust Jeff completely. I'm sure it's a brilliant book, but equally, if I get a couple of hours in and it's not doing it for me, I just won't finish it. So
you got a lot of people holding you accountable now.
Yeah. Jav knows about it. Although to be fair, by the time this episode goes out, I'll probably already have finished. or not, as the case may be. In the next episode, I'll review it and tell you if it was worth the investment of 12 hours, and maybe it will go down as, who was it that's the last question?
It was Richard Cowell.
Richard, it might be that next time I answer your question that the worst investment of my time ever was this book, 12 hours for nothing, but it also might be the best investment of my time. And I do think it'll be worth it, because when my coach recommends something, and by the way, didn't just recommend it, I'm reading the message here word for word. It was a voice note, but he went, you have to read this book. He said he's gone straight into my top 3 of all time. I'm going, I just messaged him back, I went, that is a big call. And he's now come back to me and said, yeah, it's solid. Chapter 6 is on point. You know what that means? I'm just going to skip to chapter 6 now, aren't I? You shouldn't have said that, Jeff. Now you've told me chapter 6 is the one. I'm probably just going to skip the first 5 chapters. But I won't. I'll listen to the first 6 and then I'll go, I've heard all the good stuff now. Anyway, next question.
Right, next one is from Maria. She says, I need to get rid of my partner. What tips have you got for the best way to do it amicably?
Okay, Maria. I need to get rid of my partner. I don't know if this is partner in life, business, maybe both. So I'm just going to answer it like philosophically, because it doesn't really matter which one. Ultimately, when a partnership is coming to an end, and by the way, Maria, this might actually not be that helpful for you at this point, but it might help you and everybody else in the future. For me, and I've been in business partnerships that have ended, I've been in business partnerships that are still going, so I can tell you from both good and not so good experiences, when it's time for a partnership to end, and I believe this is the case in relationships as well as business partnerships, the thing that will contribute most to how amicably that partnership will end is how clear you were at the beginning. So if at the beginning you were very clear about, here's what the expectations are, here are, let's talk about a business partnership. Here are my commitments in this business partnership. Here are your commitments in this partnership. Here are my expectations. Here are your expectations of each other. And you've got a very clear, escape plan. If we at some point realise or come to the conclusion that this isn't a good partnership or a good fit anymore, here's what we're then going to do to unravel it. I'm not sure I'd have that same attitude with a relationship as such, or a marriage, but I think certainly in business partnerships, it's just good practice to have that. So I had a recent partnership which has ended, business partnership this is. And you know what, we went into it with the best intentions, we went into it all in, we set expectations on both sides, we were very clear about what responsibilities were on my side and what responsibilities were on his side. And after 6 months, we went, hey, you know what? This isn't a good fit. And actually, the unraveling of that business partnership has been relatively easy, because when we started the partnership, we decided what the end was going to look like. And we went, look, let's set the intention that this never ends. Let's set the intention that if it does end, it's many, many years into the future. But let's also be aware that it could finish at any point. So let's work out what that would look like. And so, the clarity that we had at the start gives us the ability to unravel easily at the end, whenever that end comes. So Maria, I'm not sure if this is business partnership or personal relationship. I mean, if it's applying the same logic, by the way, to a marriage, and I'm aware that I'm now in territory that is not my area of expertise, so forgive me. But the equivalent of this in a marriage would be and we're talking financially, of course, would be like a prenup, wouldn't it? So a prenup would be something in writing which details from the beginning how things would unravel at the end. Now, I'll give my personal opinion for what it's worth. I don't like it. I don't like it in relationships. Now, that might be naive because you go, well, not having that could be financially devastating later on. But my mum and her husband, Tony, have done a lot of work with a lot of couples, and going into a marriage with any inclination or thought that it might not last forever, it's just a bad place to start from. That's only my opinion. I'm not the expert. My mum and Tony are the experts. That's their opinion. You might agree or disagree. Now, of course, Maria, I wasn't sure about the context of the question, so I've given you a few thoughts here. But certainly in business partnerships and relationships, be very, very clear. And actually, I think that's a good lesson in the relationship as well, in marriages. It's like, be very clear about what the expectations are, and be very clear about what makes you happy and what pisses you off, and have the other person be very clear about what makes them happy and what pisses them off. And I think the more you can get clarity at the start, the less likelihood you're ever going to get to this point. Now you're here at the end point where the partnership needs to end. If you don't have that clarity, by the way, part of the reason why the partnership relationship might be ending is because you didn't have the clarity in the first place. But now you are where you are. It's now time to just do your very best, I would suggest, to what I would advise is you go, right, what is your ideal scenario? Get clear on that. Ask the other person to get clear on their ideal scenario as well, and compare the two and go, right, okay, this is my ideal scenario, this is your ideal scenario. Now, the likelihood of those two scenarios matching is almost zero. If those two scenarios matched, you probably wouldn't be breaking the partnership. But then what you need to do, and by the way, this is the bit that causes the most problems in the breakup of a relationship or a business partnership, is I think this is my ideal outcome and I'm going to dig my heels in. This is your ideal outcome, you're going to dig your heels in. No one's moving at all. And so it ends up probably being decided by a third party, often it goes through the courts or whatever. And here's the thing, a good negotiation, and we're talking about break up a partnership, but a good negotiation in anything is where both parties are a little bit dissatisfied. That's a good negotiation. I know that doesn't sound like positive, because you go, well, like if I come away from a negotiation and I'm not really happy, but I'm also not fuming, and the other person comes away, they're not really happy either, but they're also not fuming, you've kind of both won in that case. Whereas if I come away from the negotiation and go, yes, I got everything I wanted, they are pissed off. That is not a win-win. If they come away really happy with everything they wanted, I'm probably really pissed off. So I guess the name of the game is compromise, and that might not feel good, Maria, because you might go, well, no, I believe I'm entitled to this, and this is, the right thing. But the other person has their perspective as well. What I would say is compromising and getting it done quickly is actually better for you, your mental, emotional, spiritual well-being, and if it's a business partnership, better for you financially. Compromising now, getting it done quick, is better than dragging it out over sometimes years, which might eventually get you a better financial result. But the opportunity cost of those years of headaches and being angry and frustrated and pissed off just isn't worth it. And I can tell you there's been times, certainly as I've matured in business, there's now been more and more occasions where I've not been particularly happy about something and I've felt that I've been wronged, but I've bit the bullet and compromised anyway, just to get it off my desk, off my chest, out of my head, and then I can move on. There's been a number of occasions like that, probably over the last 3 or 4 years, where I've essentially felt I was wronged, but taken the financial hit just to get it off my chest, off my desk, out of my head. And then, of course, you've got time and energy and space to invest in other things. And, look, I mean, by the way, these numbers are arbitrary, but like if something is a big issue and it's going to cause me a problem for months and I can solve it with 10 grand, even though I don't feel that's fair, you pay the 10 and then you go, but now I've just bought myself all this time and energy and space. And the reason people don't do this is ego. because they want to be right. And I did this for years. I'd always want to be right. I felt like I was being wronged by the other person, the other party. It's like, I want to be right. And actually that's the desire, the need to be right. It's just the ego. And when you get your ego out of the way, you go, look, this is really nothing to do with me or the other person. I'm just going to try and be objective here and see it for what it is, which is a problem that I can solve with this amount of money. Or it doesn't even need to be a money thing. It could be, I can solve this problem by giving this ground to the person. You get your ego out of the way, you give the ground, you give the money, and then you create time, energy, space for you to do the things you want to do. So anyway, that was a bit ranty, wasn't it, Jav, really? But and by the way, it's because it comes from a lot of experience. Like I've had a lot of good and bad experiences like this. And I tell you, the worst ones were when I dug my heel in. Or my heels in. The worst ones when I was stubborn, my ego got in the way, and I didn't feel like it was fair. And those are the worst ones. The best ones was when I went completely, I got rid of all emotion, got my ego out of the way and went, look, let's just see this for what it is. It's a problem. I can solve it by giving some ground, and I don't get emotionally involved. And those are the ones that I don't even think about them now.
Compromise is key.
It is, absolutely. Last question
from NAIA Walters.
Yes, NAIA.
Pretty simple. What inspires you?
What inspires me? Great question. Simple question. Not actually that easy to answer. What inspires me? Our vision inspires me. The vision that we've got for our group of companies, that really inspires me. Seeing members of the team going above and beyond and putting in the extra hours or effort or, time to develop themselves, that really inspires me. Especially when I look at it and go, like, in a lot of cases, this is not their business, yet they treat it as if it is. That really inspires me. And also it makes me work double hard. Because I go, well, if somebody who's a team member, an employee of our business, is going to those lengths, then it inspires me to do more, strive to be better. What else inspires me? My kids inspire me, like, more because they're a reminder that, like, I need to be the example. Because, they're going to naturally, kids copy everything, whether you like it or not. So they constantly inspire me to want to be better. And that's in all areas, not just in business, but be better as far as health, fitness, being, level-headed, which I'm not always, but I try to be, because I know they're watching. So they certainly inspire me. And a lot of people that I've been privileged to get to know and work with and become friends with over the years that have built amazing companies and make, they make huge impact in the world. They really inspire me as well. But I get inspiration from a lot of different places. So I feel inspired watching great movies or sporting events, TV shows, like certain things. I get inspired by the silliest little things, actually, that you might not expect. But I think the fact that there are so many different things that inspire me helps me to operate from a more inspired place, and hopefully then provide some inspiration to other people as well through things like the Q&As that we're putting out, things like the podcast, things like Expert Empires and our events and masterminds and all of these things, hopefully, because I've got many, many sources of inspiration, hopefully I get to pass some of those on. Quick reminder, by the way, thank you for all the questions. Keep them coming. If you've got questions you'd like to put forward for future episodes of Open and Real Q&A, send them to Jav via email, Jav, at expertempires.com. That's Jav, Jav, at expertempires.com. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you give the channel a subscribe, and then you'll be notified when we put new episodes out. Equally, if you want to pop questions that you'd like to submit for future episodes in the comments below, you can do that as well. So thanks everyone for watching. Thanks Jav, Question Master, as always. Thanks everyone for submitting the questions, and see you all soon. Hopefully see you at Expert Empires. Some of you that have been fortunate enough to get a ticket, because we are sold out, but looking forward to seeing you there. Remember, more you connect, more you collect.